I'm Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. Welcome back to a new season of EdCast. We look forward to bringing you more of our in-depth conversations about the issues and people making the news. 2018 promises to be a year of challenges and change. New York City will be losing its two chancellors, Carmen Farina of the Department of Education and James Milliken of the City University. What do these resignations say about the future of education in the city? Do their departures signal radical change or a continuation of existing policies with new faces? Today, David Bloomfield, author, professor, and commentator, joins me to examine what lies ahead. We'll discuss what's been working and what needs to be done to ensure that all New Yorkers receive a quality education. Coming up now on EdCast.
Now formally announcing the second retirement of Carmen Farina.
This afternoon, the mayor announced Chancellor Farina will be leaving in the coming months.
We have brought back dignity to teaching, joy to learning, and trust to the system.
Her selection as chancellor 4 years ago was applauded by the teachers union, tired of battling with former Mayor Bloomberg.
We know there are things that need to happen, but they need to happen with people, not to people.
The longtime educator quickly joined the mayor to undo many signature Bloomberg initiatives, like school letter grades.
Schools have unique qualities that cannot be captured in a letter grade. They are not restaurants.
De Blasio and Farina also reformed Bloomberg's reforms for bad schools. Instead of quickly shutting them down, they created the Renewal Schools program, a $500 million effort to turn around 94 low-performing schools. But the chancellor recently announced several of them would shut down anyway.
We're not giving up. We're just kind of tweaking a little bit about where the support is needed.
People don't understand sometimes the scale, the reach, and the importance, as you suggest, of CUNY.
And why do you think it's so important?
Well, because for 170 years, CUNY's been the place that has said we want to educate those people regardless of where they come from, national origin, any other demographic distinction based on their talent, and we'll make it easy for them to come in terms of the cost. And so today we see it as the place. If you care about public higher education in this country, as I know you do, there's no place like CUNY that offers the access at the broadest level with the highest quality education.
My guest today is David Bloomfield. He is professor of education leadership, law, and policy at Brooklyn College and the CUNY Graduate Center. He is also a frequent commentator in print, digital, and broadcast media. Thank you so much for joining us today on EdCast. It's a pleasure to have you. We were looking at what's ahead in education in 2018, and I think the big thing that comes to my mind first is the recognition of schools Chancellor Carmen Farina. What do you think is behind her decision to resign right now?
Carmen Farina has been chancellor for 4 long years. It's a high visibility, high energy job. She came out of retirement to do this. I'm not saying that her energy has flagged, but it makes sense. And from the first, I don't think anybody really expected her to stay for all 8 years if there had been a re-election, and there now has been a re-election. And so I think she felt that this was a good time to be stepping down, but she's only stepping down when a successor is named, so it's not immediate, and it's not clear when that will be.
Do you think she's a tough act to follow?
I think she is a tough act to follow, in the sense that she is New York City's quintessential educator. She was a teacher, a successful principal, a superintendent, and she fulfilled all of Bill de Blasio's promise of an educator chancellor. By the same token, she has been criticized for not having a larger vision, but having a lot of small bore initiatives. And so a new chancellor, I think, does have the ability to have their own legacy if Bill de Blasio decides to let that individual take the reins.
One of the things I think you had said earlier about her is that she brought educational confidence to the school system and she helped calm the waters. Do you still believe that's true when you look at her legacy now, or what will be her legacy?
Well, let's be clear, the New York City educational waters are never calm, And
or clear.
Or clear. But remember that she came after not only the turmoil of the intentional turmoil of the Bloomberg-Klein years, but after mayoral control was initiated. And so the really important thing that happened was there was all of this transformation during the Bloomberg-Klein years, and what she has done is to restore a degree of calm to that situation, particularly when it comes to teacher morale. The Bloomberg years really were a time and an era nationally, statewide too, of unfair teacher accountability, test-based accountability, when the teachers weren't necessarily responsible for the subject that their student was being taught in. And so Carmen has really stepped back from that kind of punitive situation, and in many respects at that level has restored teacher morale.
It was clear when we had her on the program, I think the one thing I was so taken with was her love of teaching, that she really was a true educator, and that her respect for teachers, that she really she was aware of the fact that their morale had been suffering terribly. Now, Joel Klein has a mixed kind of legacy. I know he was extremely unpopular among parents and the teachers union and teachers, and yet some people give him some credit for, as you said, being a transformative chancellor. What do you think are some of the things that the Bloomberg administration started that, you know, may have given some benefit to de Blasio?
Remember that 110 Livingston Street, the old Board of Education in Brooklyn, was well known, was a symbol of a Kremlin-esque bureaucracy, and it was highly politicized with a small p. So what happened during the Bloomberg years was changing that bureaucracy. There's still a huge bureaucracy. There's still a lot of waste. Bloomberg can be accused of some waste himself with computer systems, et cetera. But really what happened was there was a renewed focus on what was going on in the classroom and to kick out the complacency of the old Board of Education. So in that sense, the Bloomberg years were triumphant is in kind of giving a new idea about what New York City public education could be. Whether Carmen Farina brought that to the apogee, I'm not really sure, but we are on an upward trend in some respects.
Now, the de Blasio administration is certainly taking credit for what they see as rising graduation rates. What do you think of that?
I think we have to be careful when the administration, any administration, touts statistics. For example, graduation rates, which is what Mike Bloomberg decided was going to be his metric of choice, can be seen not necessarily as an increase in learning, but an increase in what they called credit accumulation. One way to increase the number of high school credits that students get is through something called credit recovery.
What is that exactly?
What that means is a student fails the course. That's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to fail a course. Teachers will usually give students the benefit of the doubt. But when a student fails a course under credit recovery, they can do an extra assignment or a computer-based quiz and get full credit for that course. And I think in many respects, the increase in graduation rate under Klein and under Farina is more a manipulation of statistics than an increase in student learning. And that means that the chancellor offloaded some of that job to the CUNY chancellor in the form of remediation.
Yes, so when Chancellor Milliken was here, this is something near and dear to the two of us. We're both at CUNY. When Chancellor Milliken was here, we certainly talked about the fact that so many of the students entering CUNY who are New York City high school graduates are in need of remediation or developmental work when they enter the CUNY system. So I would imagine the work, well, let's say the work for a new chancellor. What do you think are going to be some of the key issues for a new chancellor?
Well, I guess we're talking back again, the
so
DOE chancellor?
Well, we'll go back to CUNY in a moment, but I know that one of the things CUNY sees is that students, as you said, the graduation rates for the DOE may not be reflecting being prepared for college. There may be a preparedness factor that is not there, even though they have the diploma. Do you see that as a big issue for an incoming chancellor? I guess both for the DOE and for CUNY.
It certainly, we'll deal with the DOE first.
Yeah, let's go with them first.
It really is important to me, I think to the citizens of New York, mostly to the parents and children, that students get a quality education. It's not about the marquee statistics. It's really about learning, and therefore the ability to not only be retained in high school, but retained in college and be able to retain a job that they want.
Right.
And so that's a really hard job, and I think that that's something that Carmen Farina really didn't make a dent in. And I would ascribe that in large part because of her unwillingness to take on big issues like school desegregation.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these big issues. I know the mayor will probably still be running on his campaign for equity and excellence, in which he outlined a number of broad initiatives, but you're seeing a glaring lack right now in one big issue. So let's talk about segregation. What's the big issue here?
The big issue is that it's very hard to educate high concentrations of poor, minority, and marginalized children whose families are in shelters, their parents may be incarcerated, children who need special attention because of special needs or are English language learners. And when we have high concentrations of those kids in the same school, it becomes very difficult. We've known that since the 60s and the Coleman Report. There is no question about it, and there's no question that everybody can have their academic performance improved, the high scores and the low scores, by a desegregated educational environment.
How segregated is the New York City school system?
It was called by UCLA one of the most segregated school systems in the country. I want to be clear, that was actually a statement about New York State, not only New York City, but it certainly goes for New York City as well.
So what could the mayor do that he has not been doing to better integrate the school system?
There are several things that he can be doing. First of all, he has to be looking system-wide. He has to be looking at inter-district approaches as well as district approaches on attendance zones. He also can be educating the public about desegregation, that desegregation is not going to harm children who are now performing well. It will help them. It will not only help them academically, it will help them socially. They're going to be living in a diverse economy, a diverse community, we hope, and all of that means that children should be educated in a diverse environment.
You and I both know there's been resistance to this approach. There was a controversy on the Upper West Side. I mean, parents are very anxious and nervous when they hear that a school that they feel has been successful is now going to be better integrated, or that their kids will be leaving a neighborhood school. So what's your take on all of this? What is the way to integrate a school? People say, I want my child going to a neighborhood school. So what could be done, and what do you think he should be doing? When you say attendance zones, what does that mean exactly?
Well, so this is a academic and professional area for work. And so what de Blasio should be doing is assembling a large number of professionals who know about demography, who know about education, who know about social work, who know about other areas, and get them to work on this as a citywide issue, and then put it out there to the community, because the technocrats aren't going to get it right. But by looking at this as a professional task, rather than as a political football, the mayor could go a long way toward moving this ahead and getting community confidence that he's not out to simply score political points, but to improve education.
Now, another big issue, of course, Bloomberg's approach to a struggling school or failing school was to close it. And there was some controversy about the success of closing failing schools. The de Blasio administration and Carmen Farina have taken another approach. They've set up renewal schools. They've done different approaches to help struggling schools. Do you think they have been successful?
I don't think that they've been successful yet. So improving a low-performing school is a difficult task. years in the making. Again, I'll go back to the point I was making before. I don't think it can be substantially improved without changing enrollment patterns. You're always going, as long as you're concentrating the lowest performing kids in particular schools, by the way, allowing those other schools to skate on higher performance, then you're always going to have a tranche of schools that are designated as failing. It's a myth. There aren't necessarily, there are better schools and worse schools, better leaders, worse leaders, better teachers, but really the object of de Blasio should be to lift all boats and not to have what I regard as a separate but equal approach, because it's always going to be a failing strategy.
What other key issues do you think the new chancellor has to be facing head on?
Well, I want to go back to the renewals for a second, because if de Blasio is not going to go the route of desegregation, then he really has to come up with a better strategy that works. And so far, the community schools approach, which everybody understood not to be a direct approach to school improvement, to academic improvement, but really social improvement.
But we thought that would be linked to academic improvement.
Right. Well, we haven't gotten there yet, and the jury is still out. So other areas that he needs to address are the middle school issues. I was just dealing with someone, a 15-year-old who was at a 7th grade level. She didn't feel comfortable going to class with 13-year-olds. She wasn't ready for high school. She dropped out. Carmen Farina promised to address the middle school issue. We still have a huge problem with our middle schools. Another matter is we have a high degree of inequity with our screened high schools and our screened middle schools. They have to address that. They have to address the issue of diversity in the competitive high schools by eliminating, at least for the mayorally controlled high schools, like Lehman's, the SHSAT, the single rank ordered test that students live or die by in terms of admission to the competitive high schools.
That's
so those are a few issues
football. That's another big one. Now, in terms of the relationship between CUNY and the DOE, I know, as I said, when Chancellor Milliken was here, he certainly touted the good relationship that CUNY has with the DOE. Do you see things that they could be doing together that would improve the situation for students?
Well, take teacher education, near and dear to my heart.
Okay, let's take it.
And there always has been a disconnect between CUNY, which is responsible for most of the teacher education for New York City public school teachers, and the DOE, where they go to work. And so I think there needs to be much more coordination between the DOE and CUNY on teacher education. Another area, of course, is this idea of remediation. The chancellors need to get together and decide on what makes sense for a reasonable degree of proficiency. I mean, there just isn't between what the DOE regards as proficiency exiting high school and what CUNY regards as proficiency for entering college. That gap needs to be closed.
Well, CUNY itself is dealing with the issue of remediation and what it now calls remediation and what it doesn't, and eliminating the notion and the concept of remediation from many of the campuses, certainly the senior college campus. So a lot of students are still entering those campuses that are technically in need of remediation, but there's
there are two issues related, closely related. One is remediation, the other is retention. And what happens is that even with remediation, many students are dropping out after their
well,
first,
they say
second,
that's one of the causes.
Right, and so that has to be taken on. You know, one of the great things about mayoral control should have been that there is interagency cooperation at the DOE level to make sure that students are really ready and supported as they go into CUNY. And as we know, it's the city that pays for the community colleges, and so there's a role for the mayor in that too.
Let's talk about the mayor then, going back for a minute. What kind of chancellor do you think he wants? And in other words, he has, do you have a clue? Does he want a chancellor who's very independent? Do you think he wants a chancellor who just kind of does his bidding? What's your take, and do you have any candidates in mind who you think might be good for the job?
I think that the mayor wants somebody who will keep everything stable. He doesn't really need a new education initiative. He can run for higher office if he chooses on the legacy of universal preschool education.
Right.
Third
Pre-K,
graders,
right?
3-year-olds now, as well as 4-year-olds. So he doesn't really need to show great success. What he needs to show is order, safety, and a few bubbly little initiatives that make people feel that things are going. Yeah, I mean,
achievement gap is still pretty big.
There
I mean,
are
there's lots of big
huge
issues.
All I'm saying is that first and foremost, he wants to keep things from blowing up. It's interesting that the Farina administration has been relatively scandal-free. We did have a recent murder of a student, a very serious matter. He keeps de Blasio keeps having problems in terms of critics saying that the schools are disorderly. But by and large, as long as things can be safe and incremental increases can be demonstrated, I think that he's safe. So probably what he wants in a chancellor is, first and foremost, somebody who can just keep things bubbling the way they are.
Not so transformative, but be more restorative or something like that.
Right, or you know, continuity. Okay. I think he said he wants continuity. I think that's really what he wants. I think he also wants to get a woman of color. If you look at the larger political scene in New York City, we have a white male mayor, we have a white male city council president, we have a white male police commissioner, and it's just embarrassing. And I think he'll be looking demographically to change that literal picture.
We only have 1 minute left. I think you are one of the most knowledgeable people who sits across from me, so I'm going to ask you, if you could staff the chancellor position for both the DOE and for CUNY, who might be some candidates that you would like to have considered?
Well, I don't know the whole field. We certainly, one interesting thing is about CUNY that we have 2 outstanding presidents who could fulfill either or maybe both roles at the same time.
You want to name them?
Well, there's the presidents of Medgar Evers College and there's the president of Queens College.
Felo Matos Rodriguez, he was the president of OSOS.
And so those are 2 individuals, males, who might be able to take over CUNY or the DOE.
Or the DOE. Anybody else?
Right. There's Betty Rosa. Betty Rosa is the chancellor of the Board of Regents, a longtime Department of Education teacher, principal, superintendent. She's available. Kathy Cashin, also a regent, is a Brooklyn former teacher and principal and superintendent. So there are a lot of people just from the home team, let alone looking nationally.
So you have some good candidates out there. They should listen. So thank you, David. We're out of time. So thank you so much for joining us today on EdCast. David Bloomfield, come back again.
Thank you.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites. Concerns that children are addicted to digital screens have been rising. eSchool News suggests we ask the following 5 questions about student screen time. If using digital screens is harmful, should schools disallow them? Can tech companies, which encourage screen addiction, find solutions that will still allow them to grow profits? Should screen addiction be labeled a public health problem? What role can advertising, marketing, and other media play in reducing screen time? And lastly, should corporations take on childhood screen addiction as one of their social causes? Because there is a link between school climate and student learning, educators seek to identify those behaviors that can improve a school's learning environment. Drawing on Kickboard's Positive School Culture Inventory, Education Dive reports that kindness, showing pride in one's work, and using appropriate communication are key student behaviors that contribute to a positive school environment. While many PhD candidates hope to find jobs within the academy, a new study finds that PhDs are happiest outside of higher education. 93% of PhDs working at nonprofits were satisfied with their jobs, compared to 88% working in higher ed. Key factors include the limiting hierarchical culture of universities and the more nurturing environments which may be found in other industries. The idea of merit pay for teachers has been controversial. Some studies showed no positive effects on student learning, and others warned of negative impacts regarding teacher morale. But Chalkbeat reports on a new federal study that sees some merit in merit pay. The results suggest that merit-based bonuses can raise student test scores, although not by large amounts. There was no corresponding decline in teacher satisfaction in the school that gave these increases. That's it for this edition of EdCast. Till next time, class dismissed.